Hello and welcome back to the Save the Cat Deep Dive series. What this series is about is that I take what I've learned about the story structure of Save the Cat and I talk about how I implement these beats into my own storytelling and how I write books. So I highly recommend checking down below if you haven't heard about Save the Cat, learning about the story structure first before coming into this series. I also have a playlist below for all the videos starting from the beginning beats. So in case you've happened upon this video, which we're getting into the second act now, you'll probably want to check out that playlist and go in order of the first act to begin with. And so that is what this series is covering. And again, this is how I implement these beats. So it is okay if you hear me say something and you disagree with me. That's totally fine. Just take whatever works for you from these videos into your writing practice and discard whatever doesn't work for you. You do not have to do everything that I do. This is really just to try and help out people and help give a bit of extra guidance. It's not, prescriptive in that you must do this because certainly I am not the creator of this story structure. This is just how I do it. And today we're doing something a little bit different. We are covering two beats today. So we're covering the break into two and break into three. So break into two is the transition into act two and break into three is the transition into act three. And so I wanted to talk about these together because they are a similar sort of transition chapter. And I thought it would just be better to pull those into one video than to make two separate videos because they're so similar in, different ways. They're very similar, but they also have some important differences. And so that is what this video is going to be about today. I'm going to begin, as always, by reading the Save the Cat definition of the beat itself. So we're going to start with break into two, and then we're going to go to break into three. And then I'm also going to share some final comments at the end there about these beats. So from Save the Cat Writes a Novel, the break into two is the moment when we leave the old world and old way of thinking behind and step into a new world and a new way of thinking. It's important to note that heroes don't have to physically go anywhere in order to break into two, but they do have to try something new. As in all the Save the Cat beats, the way that I begin to approach this is character first. This is the way I approach the Save the Cat in general. If you've been watching these videos, you know that. I do have a video below where I talk about how I create compelling characters and the way that I create character arcs. And so I am moving forward from that. So for example, you have a character and the lie that they believe about the world is that forming long-term attachments with people ultimately ends in heartache. And so as a character, they avoid things that would create long-term attachments with people. They don't really have any friends. They have a lot of acquaintances. They don't have any family, things like that. Like that is the sort of character that in this example we're working with. So in, the catalyst moment for this character, let's say in this example, is that they've come into responsibility for a child. And so this debate is, what am I going to do? Am I going to take the responsibility of this child or am I going to ignore them? And they can do whatever, whether that means the child is kidnapped, whether they're on the street, whether they go to an orphanage, doesn't matter. I am not taking any responsibility for them whatsoever. And of course, because we're moving the story forward, in this debate section, they've decided to take responsibility for this child. And so the way I think about this, and the way Save the Cat also describes this in some way, not in that example description that I gave, but elsewhere within Save the Cat, that is the way that I think is most simple to think about this beat, which is your character is trying to fix things the wrong way. They are trying to ignore and get around what would be their internal conflict resolution, and they're trying to cling to the lie that they believe. So in this case, this character thinks, you know what I'm going to do? Okay, I'm going to take responsibility for the child temporarily because I have no problem with short-term attachments, but I do have a big problem with long-term attachments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to find someone that I can offload this child onto safely so that I feel okay about where they are, but like I'm not going to take care of them. So This break into Act 2 is the transition of going from that old world into the new one, in which they have to find a home for the child. And that's going to be the main thrust and the plot going forward. And so this break into 2 beat, there are choices here that can be made from this point. And so I tend to do one of two things. Either I treat this as a true transition chapter, and I do the whole, that was the old world and this is what the new world looks like, and this is how the character behaves in this new world, and this is how they're adjusting to the new world. Or I go straight into the fun and games. And it really depends on the story. I find that when the Save the Cat beat kind of asserts itself as its own sort of chapter in a story, like some other beats might do in setup that might have multiple chapters or at least one chapter, is when they're actually physically going into a new place. I will use this chapter or this beat to introduce the reader to the new place, to show a bit of how the main character is adjusting to this. So in this case, how are they adjusting to having this child attached to them all the time? And how is that relationship progressing? And what are the kind of, little problems that we're seeing inklings of this being the way the character is living now? And how are we seeing them trying to cling to the lie and being like, no, I don't form long attachments to people, and doing a sort of transition chapter that shows that. However, if you decide to do this, again, it should be story worthy. It should not be a chapter that you could take out and it wouldn't matter to the long-term story. And so sometimes what I'll do in this is, I'll insert some red herrings or some hints about things that are going to come later, or something kind of crucial that seems small to the reader might happen in this that we're going to go back to later. I try and layer in something else so that it is very necessary to have that chapter in there, because I'm wanting to establish this new world. I don't want to lose the reader in that transition, which is usually like if they're physically going someplace new that I'm doing this. However, sometimes this beat does not exert itself as a full chapter for me, and it's just kind of like I'm aware that I'm showing the character moving from the old world to the new world, but that might be like a paragraph instead of being a full chapter. And really, I'm essentially kind of smushing this into the B story and the fun and games. So I'm kind of combining it with other beats. An example I would give for this is like the theme stated beat that we have in the first act. It would be very shocking to me if the theme stated had its own full chapter. It's really not the sort of beat that needs that much time to exert itself. The same with, the opening image. The opening image is going to be like that first paragraph or that first kind of image you have. It may not necessarily be a full chapter. And so that's how I think about this break into 2 beat, is that you're really thinking about that transition and not necessarily needing to have a full chapter. So it's really what works for you and your story. Sometimes you'll want a full chapter transition, and sometimes it's just kind of like, okay, this is what's happening and this is what we're doing. And you just kind of focus on that prompt of the character trying to fix things in the wrong way. And now for the definition for break into 3 from Save the Cat Writes a Novel. So, if the break into 2 was the hero figuring out how to fix things the wrong way, then the break into 3 is when the hero finally figures out how to fix things the right way. So I do find it interesting that the initial definition didn't mention the fixing things the wrong way, but that's why I said with the break into Act 2 that it's best to think of it, the prompt that I use is fixing things the wrong way, so that now when you're getting into the break into 3, you know that this is fixing things the right way. And that's really why I wanted to pair these 2 beats together, because they do go together in a sense. They're a very similar sort of transition beat. They're just kind of opposites of each other. In approaching the break into 3 beat, similar to the break into 2, there's a chapter that comes before that kind of aids in this transition. So in the case of break into 3, that beat, not chapter, the beat that comes before is Dark Night of the Soul. And so this is the very low moment for the character in which they have this revelation about, they come to this understanding of their character and what their inner conflict, what they really need, instead of going after just what they want and believing in the lie. They're finally kind of realizing what they actually need. So in the case of this example I've created, realizing that actually I do want to form long-term attachments to people, and even if some of those may lead to heartbreak, it is worth it for the ones that work out and the ones that, you know, create happiness and joy in my life. And so that kind of dark night of the soul realization then transitions into break into 3. So the dark night of the soul, I think of it as a sort of separate debate thing, in that they are realizing that they want to fix things in the right way. And then the break into 3 is that transition of how I'm actually going to fix things the right way this time. And so that's how I try and think about the break into 3. So in the case of this character, for example, it's this decision of, okay, I am going to actually find a way to take responsibility for this child, and I will be the one who is responsible for them. And that's how it goes. Of course, you're going to have a bunch of things in the story that come before. Obviously, you know, you have to create some sort of conflict for how they're going to take responsibility for the child, and like there's something clearly that's preventing them from doing that. Otherwise they would just do it and the story would be over. But that's where everything that comes after break into 3 and the finale comes after, is that, you know, they've got to actually find a way to do this thing and to take responsibility for that child. And the finale is whatever it is that they need to do in order to achieve that. But that's getting very far ahead. But essentially what I just want to express in here is exactly that transition. So similarly to the Act 2, the way this transition is, how I approach this is that maybe I have a full chapter for this if they're going to kind of have a longer journey to figuring out the how of how I'm actually going to fix things the right way. It might be that sort of transition chapter if there's something logistically that needs to be done for that. But often case for me, similarly to the break into 2, it's really just a little bit of a beat point on the way to the finale. So I'll kind of go straight from Dark Night to the Dark Night of the Soul into the finale, which is the next beat after break into 3, just because that beat doesn't necessarily need a full chapter in order to express that transition of, now I'm going to fix things in the right way. This is kind of my rough idea of how I'm going to do it. And then the finale will go into the actual doing of the thing. And so that is, again, why I wanted to pair these together, because it's very similar. It's very similar. It's just a different prompt. Now I just wanted to say kind of a final note on these 2 beats. A lot of the time I've worked with the Save the Cat beats, I have really thought of these beats and been like, why are these here? These are so useless. Like, why wouldn't you just cut this out and like go straight into the next beat? So not even bother with this, go straight into fun and games in Act 2, not even bother with this, go straight in the finale in Act 3. And I often just kind of put them in my books because I'm like, I'm following the beats, and I will look at these and I'll be like, what is the point of these? What is the point of these? And so I wanted to talk about what is the point of these. And really, in the process of making this video, I've really come to an understanding about these beats. And I think the reason why is I find that I have a tendency to think that the beats must be something very significant and must have this kind of, big purpose. But again, there are beats in Save the Cat that are not necessarily like that, as in the case of that theme stated beat. It is really a beat that can be expressed in like a sentence on the page, but it does have an importance. And I think with these transition beats, the importance is really that prompt, because I do find those prompts to be very helpful in stories in like kind of helping me lead into the next act. And I also think the thing about these break into beats is that they set the tone for what that entire act is going to be. So the break into 2, that prompt of fixing things in the wrong way, that sets the tone for the entirety of Act 2, because I know that that entire second act is going to be about that character doing that, is going to be about them trying to fix things the wrong way and slowly making their way in that journey to realizing that maybe that isn't what they should be doing. So by the time they get to that break into 3, then they have that natural progression of, and now I'm going to fix things the right way. And that entire third act is about them trying to fix things the right way. And so I think the importance of this beat is less the beats themselves and more the fact that they are setting the tone for that entire act. And they are telling you this is kind of what this part of the story is going to be. And I do actually find that to be very helpful and very necessary, because it's a very simple prompt that I think has really been helpful to me in constructing my stories. And that is it for this Save the Cat deep dive video. I am glad that I put these together. So on your journey of watching these videos, you can use the break into 2 now because we're in that order, but I will then go through the entire second act at some point, and then this can be a video that you come back to after the Dark Night of the Soul to look at this break into 3 again. But I do think it is good to pair these together because of how similar they are and the way the prompts sort of work off of each other. But I hope this video was helpful to you. Next month, I will have another one of these Save the Cat deep dive videos, and we will continue going until we reach that finale. I'm also thinking of doing a video where at the end, I take one example and I do the entire beat sheet for that example. So if that's something that you would be interested in, that you would like, definitely let me know in the comments if that's something you would want to see, because I'm thinking about making that video and if that would be helpful to you. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!